Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. Welcome back to episode 7 entitled It's a Digital Mess Cleanup Time. Now today's episode is going to pertain to not really just things that are digital messes that need to be cleaned up, but pretty much anything digitally that you should be doing this summer so that you're ready by fall. And also, if you're just catching us, this is now the second episode in series 2 called Fast Forward. So every episode within the series is going to be talking about things that you should be doing right now to help you have an easier, calmer, and less chaotic fall. So if you follow along and do these things during the summer, you're going to find that when fall comes, it's still going to be very busy. The beginning of the school year always is, but at least you will have done quite a bit to get yourself prepared and you'll feel organized and ready to go. So before we dive into today's episode, I just want to say I am super excited because I got a new mic. So not only did I upgrade to a new mic, I upgraded to a microphone because in the past it was just me and the laptop. There was no microphone, believe it or not. Well, that was probably pretty believable. So my hope is that with this microphone, the audio is going to sound so much better than it has in the past. So I really hope that you like it, and if you do, would you let me know? I'm interested to know if you can tell a difference and if you like the new mic. So please send me a message and let me know. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with this week's episode because there's quite a bit to look at. And like I've already alluded to, when I say a digital mess, not everything in this episode is really going to speak to digital messiness, as it were. It's more, some of it will be, and then some of it will just be in general how to organize yourself digitally. Now, I probably don't have to explain why, but we live in a digital world. Most of what we do as teachers is done digitally, online, on our devices. So with that comes the implication that we have to have a really good organized system digitally. So this first point that I'm going to talk about is the importance of a very well planned out pacing guide. And I've included this in the digital part because I think most of us now are doing this digitally. However, if you're not doing it digitally, continue doing it as you are. But I included this in the digital section just because, I don't know, for me, when I think planning, lesson planning, and when I even a pacing guide, it's all digital. So I thought that probably makes the most sense. So I'm including it in the segment. Now, pacing guides. I know that there are lots of feelings on pacing guides and, passionate feelings and opinions about pacing guides. So I'm not really here to debate a pacing guide, but I am going to throw in the fact that I do believe in pacing guides. There you have it. I believe in them. Now, let's be clear on what I mean when I say pacing guide. We all need a very clear map of how to get to our end goals. I strongly believe that. I believe that when we are looking at not even lesson objectives, unit objectives, what objectives do I want my students to get out of this unit? What, when they're finished, should they be able to do? what should they know and understand, I need to have a clear path to get to those objectives. So we do that by means of, well, partly by means of a pacing guide. So we kind of loosely map out how we're going to meet those objectives. I think where the very passionate negative feelings about pacing guides come out is when someone feels, and maybe someone is forced, to stick to the pacing guide exactly as is. Okay, I'm talking about a curriculum map that has a clear path that tells you what units and in what order. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when I say a pacing guide. Now, that's going to be broken up into weekly and then, well, it's going to be broken up into monthly, then weekly, then daily objectives and details. So, yes, we need it. That's why I believe it's important. Do I think you absolutely can't stray from a pacing guide? Well, depending on what your school is telling you, you may or may not be able to. But my personal feeling is absolutely there are going to be times when, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this today, and I can't because something happened with my lesson, or it was an off day and students just didn't get it. I can't, in all fairness, move on to the next thing until my students have been able to meet those objectives for right here and right now. So I think that pacing guides become, in curriculum maps, I'm using those terms interchangeably. I believe that those negative feelings about the maps and guides are when teachers feel that there's no room to stray from them, because clearly there are instances when we have to, and as professionals we know when that's happening, and we should be able to give our students what they need so that they can meet the objectives. Otherwise, if you just move on to the next thing because it's time to move on, then you're also doing a very huge disservice for your students. So, there's quite a few factors, but that's why I believe we do need a pacing guide. I also want to share a story. So if we think of your curriculum map or your pacing guide, whatever you want to call it, we think of it as a map. We then begin to understand the importance of this map because it truly, truly helps us to understand how we're going to get to those objectives. It happens by design, not just plain luck. It happened that way. We have to design it that way. We have to plan it that way. And that's why a curriculum map is so good. But true story, I have a twin sister. Her name is Tiffany. She's not a teacher. Everyone asks me that when they find out I have a twin. That's the first thing they want to know. She's not a teacher. She's actually an accountant. She is the manager of her accounting department. And hello, Tiffany, if you're listening. Hopefully you are. Not sure that you are. But when we were probably early 20s, very early 20s, we're from California. That's where we were living. But my parents were living in Nevada. So my sister got the grand idea to go move with them and live with them in Nevada. And so she did. And yeah, that lasted for a whole week. And then she decided she was going to return to California. So my sister, being my sister, decides to head out to California without a map because she thought she could feel her way back to California. So it didn't end very well for her. She took what normally is a 7-ish hour, maybe 8 hour at the most trip, and she turned that into a 16-hour trip. But luckily for Tiffany, she realized along the way that her feelers were not working as well as she thought they would. So she did finally end up going to a gas station and buying herself a map. And guess what? After that, she was able to get to California the correct way. So all of that is to say, let's not be like Tiffany. Use a map, use a curriculum map. We need to, because this is what's going to guide us to ensure that students meet those learning objectives, or at least everything that we're doing is leading towards those objectives. So that's my case for a curriculum map. So let me just kind of explain what I do. So I think I have explained this before, but I am the grade level leader on my grade level. As a team, we pretty much have everything planned out. Pretty much means everything is planned out. So we have in the past sat together as a team and decided exactly how our school year looks. We know what units we are teaching, and we know when we are teaching, and they always occur in that specific order. So example, our school year is divided into 5 bimesters. That's just how it is. So bimester 1, we're always teaching myself and my community. Unit 2, which also occurs during bimester 2, is always during that second bimester. So the bimesters and the units at this point are the same every single school year. However, every school year that has to be updated in terms of the actual beginning dates and end dates, and then included in that specific dates of holidays and special events and anything that we need to know, such as parent-teacher conferences. So what I do as a grade level leader is I plug all of that into Google Calendar. I really like Google Calendar as a wonderful tool to do your overarching plans. I don't personally find it very useful for my daily detailed plans or even my unit detailed plans, and that's primarily because anyone who's familiar with Google Calendar, you know that, I'll probably like any digital calendar, once the day passes, that information is gone. So it's always just worked out best for me to have anything that's just lets me know what, the most basic thing that I need to know, as in what unit and what week we're on. I put that in Google Calendar. And the other great thing about Google Calendar is, of course, you can share your whole team on that calendar. So, it depends on if you're in a situation where if you have a grade level leader who's doing the pacing guide, then you might not need to do that. But if you don't have someone on your team who's doing it, you for sure want to do that. Because it's such a great way. And then, like I said, because it's Google Calendar, you can share it with your team. You can also share it with other grade levels because, sometimes you get invited to events by other grade levels, and it's really nice to know who's working on what and what things might possibly coincide. So Google Calendar is great for that. Okay, that was our first thing that we want to digitally be working on this summer. And again, I would designate week where you're doing your digital items. So maybe now that you're listening to the show, have this week be your week that you're doing this. Item number 2 would be your unit map. So again, this is a little more detailed information about those units that you would have plugged in on Google Calendar or wherever you're plugging it in. So I just did what units during what bimesters, that's plugged into Google Calendar, but now I need to know the details of my units. Now again, our team has already planned these out. So because of that, it makes the work much easier after you initially set it up, because now I'm going to go into my template that already has all of the work plugged in there, and I just have to tweak a few things. So I'm looking at my first unit, and I should just say we use the Understanding by Design unit template. Again, I will link all of this in the show notes, but I just think this is a fabulous way to set up your units, because if you have not heard of Understanding by Design, I'm shocked, but if you're not using it, I'm even more shocked, because I just really believe in backwards planning. But the template is already formatted so that you can set up your unit in a very easy way, and it will just really help as you're planning out your units. And of course, you can add things to the template as needed. So I'm looking at my unit right now, and I already see I made a mistake because I gave you the wrong title. Unit 1, it's called Me and My Community. So in there we have, things that I don't need to change, like the title. What I do need to look at is the length of weeks, because I know that has changed slightly. So there are some things that I'm going to be changing. I'm going to change the actual beginning and end date to the unit. But other things I have set up in here that are generic, they don't need to be changed. Like things that are happening I actually have a starting week 2, because week 1 is basically just building community. We don't start anything really truly academic until week 2 of school. And even then, it's very limited on what we're starting. Just, letter reviews and number sense and whatnot. So I don't have to actually change that, because that was purposely set up week 2, week 3, week 4, so that when I don't have to change the dates on that, because week 2 is going to fall wherever week 2 falls on the calendar that's already been set up in Google Calendar. So this will be very easy for me to change. Now I also have our math plugged in there, and that one will have to be tweaked a little bit because I have the number of instructional days plugged in. Last year that was 22 days, but I'm not sure that's the same for this year. I'm not sure that it's not the same, but I have to actually go back and count the days on the calendar. Again, I'm the grade level leader, so I'm doing this for the team. If you don't have someone doing that for you, I do suggest knowing how many instructional days you have, even though I know it seems very tedious, but I'm going to tell you, if your school is having you follow a program, you probably want to know how many instructional days are in that program and how many actual school days, academic days there are. That's why I plug this in, so I know, some grade levels at our school are very, very tight on, just depending on their program, which I don't believe in teaching programs, and that's for another show. But for the programs that they might be following, those have a certain number of days, and we need to know how many days do we need to teach this program, and how many days do I have in this bimester, and that's going to help me know how many days I might or might not have for leeway in case I need to take an extra day because the lesson just didn't work out. So knowing the days of how many days you need to instructionally teach that and how many days you're working with in the bimester are only going to help you. So I do suggest adding that in there. And then of course any links that you have, I also include, even though I have this on our pacing guide on Google, on the Google Calendar, I've also included it in our unit because it's nice to have it all at a glance as well. And because according to Gretchen Rubin's survey, I'm an upholder, so I just kind of do these things on my own, I guess. So I guess I go above and beyond sometimes, but I do think it's important. So I have all our holidays within this document, important events, when progress reports are due, and when report cards are due, and we actually don't have report cards due in bimester 1, so that makes it easy. Also within this document, I have all of our Common Core. Yes, we're in Mexico, but we follow Common Core, so there's something you probably did not know. So I have the Common Core strands that we're following during Unit 1. I have our essential questions and enduring understandings. Again, those don't tend to change unless you're changing things through the unit. What we usually find is as we're teaching, which I'll give you an example we had during week 3, who is in my community, and we made a little note to say, ooh, we don't like that as an essential question. How about, how do community helpers make communities better places to live in? So we kind of modify as we go, because sometimes it's easier, well, you just remember more, and it's easier to see what needs to be tweaked in the moment as you're teaching it and you realize, oh, that is essential question really wasn't that essential. It didn't really get to my enduring understanding. Then we also have our key vocabulary in there. We have any real assessments that your team has, and of course, any rubrics that you might have, any pieces of evidence that you're going to use to help you determine whether or not students met learning objectives. And of course, you'll be doing formative assessments along the way, so you'll already know by the end of your unit. And then, of course, we have a place where we have more detailed learning experiences, which in this document is called Learning Plan Stage 3. So this is the last thing that gets planned. This little baby is the section where we have every week truly planned out. So this I am going to have to tweak because here we see each week again, and we have the actual dates because, again, it's helpful to have that anywhere you might be looking at a document telling you what you're going to do that week. So week 1, I need to plug in the actual dates for that, and I will do that. And then I have, this document we're using to tie in our reading and writing workshops. So because we don't dive into that the first week, I have nothing linked in there, but I do have all of our resources or mini resources that we'll be using during that first week. And then that same pattern is basically repeated for the entire unit. Week 2, exactly what reading and writing workshops we're doing, and any read alouds, our shared reading, it's all tied in there. So this is the second thing that you'll want to do. You want to make sure that your units are tweaked for your new school year, that you have links that are working, that if you need to make modifications that you haven't made during the school year, this is the time that you want to do it. Okay, so far we have talked about creating your pacing guide and updating it so that it matches your new school year. So that was our first thing we need to do. Second thing was going into your units and, again, updating those units so that it matches your brand new school year. So that might be any kind of tweaks you need to do, definitely the dates and any other modifications you might need to make. Now the next digital item that I want to talk about definitely does pertain to a digital mess. Actually, the next 2 items I have for you. So these next 2 items are digital things that need to be cleaned up, and I know for myself I'm guilty of letting things become a digital mess way beyond what would be acceptable by almost any person in this world. So that is cleaning up your digital files, and wherever your digital files may be. It may be on the cloud, it may be on your hard drive. So I've already stated or mentioned Google, but maybe I didn't mention that I'm a big Google fan. If not, I'm a big Google fan. Use Google Drive for everything. I have everything on Google Drive. I live on Google Drive. If you want to find me, go to Google Drive. That's where I'll be. So what I find myself doing is I will upload documents into Google Drive in addition to create things, but then I never, well, once in a while I do, but I very rarely go back and I delete things that I don't need. So this is going to be very, very important. I'm doing the same thing. We're going to take time. We're going to go through our files. I've been doing this in my own house, which is a house, not a file, but kind of purging things that I don't need and organizing. Well, this too is just as important. So your hard drive, if you have anything on your hard drive that you no longer need, for example, I always save, our elementary secretary will send out like a general monthly calendar every month, and then we teachers will go in there and update it as it pertains to our own individual classes and schedule. So what I do is I save it first on my hard drive and then I upload it to Google. So I've got all of this past school year's calendar sitting in my hard drive and sitting in Google. Well, neither of them are useful for me because they are time sensitive. Once the month passed, they no longer are relevant. So I have a whole school year worth of calendars, and that's just one example. So I definitely need to go back. I need to delete that so that I can, create space on my computer, but keep it running well. They tend to slow down and not work as well when we've got them bogged down with all kinds of things, especially when all those kinds of things are things that we don't even need. So look at your digital files. You know where you have your things stored. Go back, clean up, delete things that you don't need. If you have not used it in a while, that's sign one that you need to let it go. And I'm including myself on this because I have a tendency to hang on to files that, but I really like it and I used it once and it was so great, but you know what? If it's taking up space and I'm not using it, then there's probably something better out there. And maybe that's something that's better is not even a document. Maybe it's a manipulative that's sitting in my classroom. So go and look in your hard drive, remove things that are unneeded, and do this if you're putting anything in the cloud. I know with Google Drive you get a certain amount of space. I don't actually know how much space you get because I don't think I have exceeded that, but I know there is a limit. So it's really important that if you've uploaded, especially because uploaded documents are going to take up a lot of space in Google Drive, if you have uploaded documents, just go in there and start deleting it. Now, this is my plan of attack, and this is what I suggest you do. Don't just go willy-nilly about it. Don't just, I'll start here and then I'll hit there, and have some kind of strategic plan, because you may not get through it in one sitting. This might be something you work on a little bit throughout the week. So what I do, and of course it's only you're going to do, your strategic plan is going to be based on however you have your files organized. So I don't know how you have your files organized. For me, I'm going to have to go in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go file by file. That for me, so I'm going to start at the top row. I'm going to go into my very first folder that I have in there, and I'm going to just purge and get rid of whatever is unnecessary. After I've done, I'm going to complete that whole file before moving on to the next file. That way, when I end and have to pick up, I know that, okay, I started the first file, so now I'm going to, when I resume this activity, I'll be starting into my second file, and so on and so forth. So let's clean up those digital files. You will be very happy once you do. Second digital thing you want to clean up, your email, because I'm going to bet I'm not the only person who lets email sit in there forever. So the summer is a great time to go in there and start deleting those emails that are no longer relevant. No longer relevant. I do have emails sitting in my email that I'm hanging on to for a reason, and I'm not ready to let them go. But I also have so many emails that I just let them sit in there because, I might need to go back again for some reason. And they're still sitting there. So I notice this sometimes when I'm doing a search, and then something comes up that I'm like, oh, I don't know why that's still there. Well, I do. I know why, because I never deleted it. So we want to clean up our digital files, and we want to clean up our email. And I mean any email accounts that you have. So if you probably have a work email, you want to do this on your work email, and you probably have a personal email. You want to go ahead and do this with that personal email account as well, because we're trying to create a digitally cleaner space. It just is going to feel good. And again, let's keep the purpose in mind. We want to start the fall as fresh as we can, and with having already been productive, getting things ready, so that when things get busy, we feel better, we've gotten a good start. So this is going to help us do that. When we have fewer emails to sift through, we are going to feel much, much better. Okay, a couple of other digital items that you definitely want to start tackling this summer. One thing that I love to work on in the summer is my class website. So I advise this for you as well. I use Google Sites, and again, like I said, I love Google, so of course I use Google Sites. I find that not a very intuitive and easy to use, although I think they've gotten easier this past year. It's a little more intuitive. It used to be a little more non-user friendly in the past, but they've definitely improved. But I do like it, so I use Google Sites, and every year what I do is I create a newsletter that is, of course, in a digital file, and then I just include that, and that's my home page every week. That newsletter is the home page of my class website. So then I just replace every week that newsletter so it pertains to that week that we're on. The actual newsletter, and that's just going to involve a few tweaks, like changing the dates of the week, adding the schedule for the week. So once I've done that and it's uploaded on my class website, the class website is pretty much updated and ready to go. There have been years in the past where I wanted to completely redesign my website, so I took the summer to do that. So if you are, whether or not you're planning on redesigning your class website, or if you are going to just kind of update what you have, either way, you want to do that this summer. I'd also throw in, if you're whatever forms of communication that you plan on using with your parents, just have it planned out. It may not be anything that needs to be set up, or it may, but just at least have it figured out. And I'll tell you why I'm bringing this up, because typically I use my website to communicate, and then I also email my parents every day. But I'm really contemplating this year to start using the Remind as a way to communicate. I won't get rid of my website. In fact, we have to have a website, so that's not going anywhere. But I've just noticed that parents, at least the parents at our school, less and less are using email or even checking websites. So I'm having to repeat things several times, and I'm finding that their form of preferred communication is through text messaging. For whatever reason, they like that. That works for them. And although for me, my preference would be the email and the website, I have to kind of go with what's happening. And the truth is, I'm just finding, and this is prevalent not just in my classroom, but the many classes, if not every class is experiencing that. It's difficult sometimes to get parents to look at your communication sources because they're using something different. So I'm going to be investigating Remind and trying to see how, at least mentally, getting myself ready, because I haven't used it before. So I want to just read the instructions and learn a little bit about it so that I feel like I'm ready in fall when it's time to actually set that up. So I do recommend that if you're changing communication sources or just setting up communication sources, just have a general idea of how you're going to be communicating with parents, because if you're switching to something different, you will want to investigate and study up on that right now so you at least know how to use it by fall. The next item I'd like to talk about is typing up any documents that you plan on giving out in the first few weeks of school. So I'm thinking specifically, I know myself, I like to send out letters to the parents, just kind of welcoming them to my class, giving a brief little history on who I am and what kind of learning that we do in the classroom. So I like to just explain all of that in a welcome letter. And then I also have it's almost like a pamphlet that parents can flip through, because at my grade, it's actually the first grade of elementary. I think I've mentioned that I'm a pre-first teacher, And this is a grade that's very specific to bilingual schools here in Mexico. So it is a grade between kinder and first grade, and this is essentially because of the dual program that students are going through. So they're learning, they're going through the English program, which includes the American curriculum, and then the Mexican program, which includes the Mexican curriculum that's taught in Spanish. So because of that, they need a little extra time because of the two languages and the heavy curriculum. So in my situation, pre-first is the very first year at elementary, and parents are coming over and the kids are coming over from the kinder section. Well, if you have ever taught in a K-12 school, you might know how transitions between sections are quite something. Even just if you think about the transition between any elementary and then going off to middle school, and then the transition from middle school to high school, it's pretty much like that, except it's within the same school. However, it's a very big deal to the parents. So I have a special pamphlet that I give out to my parents, kind of explaining exactly what they should expect in pre-first, briefly explaining our program, and just pertinent information that they're going to need to know about the elementary section. So those are all things that, even though I have in a digital format, I always have to go back and tweak it because years, dates, those things for sure have to be changed. And then I inevitably go back and, do a little bit of revising, and then of course doing the editing. So those things are really important to have, and it is a big deal, and it could be time consuming when you're setting it up the first time. When you go back and tweak it, it's so much easier. So depending on where you are, if you're just setting it up brand new for next year because maybe you switch schools, or you're at the same school and you switch grade levels, it's going to be a much more involved process for you than it is as opposed to just going in and modifying what you already have. But in either case, it still needs to be done. So again, we want to do that and take care of it this summer instead of waiting for the fall, because if you have those things done, it just feels so much better. So anything that you need to have typed up and ready to go within the first weeks of school, you want to go ahead and do that. Even if you feel like, oh, but I don't need it, maybe I don't need it until the third week back of school. And that may be true, but guaranteed you're also going to have a million other things going on, like just your presentation alone that you might be giving in those first few weeks to parents. You'll probably want time to prepare for that, and you will need to do that then. So anything that you can do that has to be typed up, even if it doesn't need to be ready to send off day one, start working on that now. That's going to conclude this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got some tips that you can use. Don't miss next week's episode, episode 8, entitled Other Digital Matters That Matter. We'll see you then. Oh, it's not working. She's not a twin. I'm not a twin. I am a twin. What am I saying?
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.